What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Resident Evil video, and welcome to the Mod Kid channel. All the recent news that we've had about Resident Evil 9 so far is super exciting, and the gameplay that we have seen so far all together makes it look like it's gonna be a very good game. So in today's video, I wanted to go ahead and rank my favorite Resident Evil games from worst to best, and then next year when RE9 comes out, I'm gonna do this video again and include RE9 as an entry. Also, I just got a new microphone, so go down in the comments below and let me know how the quality sounds compared to my other videos. So starting off this tier list is going to be the oldest Resident Evil game, and that is of course the OG RE1. And with this game, it's really difficult to play, so I don't really go back and play it that much, even though I do own the director's cut. And don't get me wrong, I can handle fixed camera angles and tank controls, but the OG RE1 is just simply outdated. And now with the next entry is the director's cut of the OG RE1, and I put it a little bit above the other RE1 just because whenever I do play OG RE1, this is the version I always play. Simply because the director's cut is the only version of the OG RE1 that I own nowadays, but the cringy soundtrack that it has is pretty awesome and I get a good kick out of it sometimes. Alright, do you guys know which one is next? That's right, it is the OG RE2 from 1998. It's without a doubt that this is definitely one of Resident Evil's god tier games, and it's also the very first Resident Evil game that I ever played, so it definitely introduced me to the entire franchise. So, not much else really to be said there. That one's definitely going to be going up in the god tier games, and moving on with the next one is going to be the OG RE3. This is also a god tier game that introduces the first kind of stalker enemy in a survival horror game, and it also has so many different scenarios that you can play through, with a lot of different costumes as well. Our next entry is going to be Resident Evil Survivor from 2000. This one's going to be going in about the middle of this tier list because I think that it was flawed, but still enjoyable. There was several different routes and areas that you could take in Survivor that would change the story a little bit, but altogether it would always have the same ending. It's a fun game, but it's also pretty quick and easy to beat. Now, moving on with this tier list is going to be Resident Evil Code Veronica and not Resident Evil CVX. Apparently, the guy that made this tier list decided that he should add both Code Veronica and CVX to this list, but I'm pretty sure both of them are pretty much the same exact game, except for the fact that one has better graphics and quality. I haven't played the original Code Veronica since the PS2 days, and it was actually one of the first RE games that I played that got me introduced to the franchise, so I do remember it pretty fondly, but I'll definitely have to put CVX up here in the god tier games, and just leave the original Code Veronica down there in Great Games category. I know that Resident Evil Code Veronica Battle Mode was one of the coolest kinds of mini-game modes that they've had, and I'm not sure if it was on the original Code Veronica or not, but if it wasn't and it was only exclusive to CVX, then that definitely gives Code Veronica X a lot more points in my opinion. There's a few RE games in here that I've never played, so we're just going to get those out of the way, and we're going to move on to the next RE game in this entry, and that's going to be RE1 Remake. If you want to experience the original story of Resident Evil, this game is definitely the best way to go about experiencing it, and that explains why I put the OG RE1 at such a low ranking at the beginning of this video. I still love all the OG RE games, but this is the only remake that made me never want to go back to playing the original version. Okay, the next Resident Evil game is a pretty good game, don't get me wrong, but I think it's pretty flawed. It's like pretty much the only Resident Evil game I can think of that doesn't feature the item box. And because of that, us Resident Evil players are forced to drop our items on the floor and remember where we left them last. Which kind of feels like such a stupid concept, and that could have been easily avoidable if Capcom just added an item box. Also, switching off between Billy and Rebecca was kind of different for a Resident Evil game, and I think it should have just been co-op. Now moving on with the next entry is one of my childhood favorites as well. I've always loved Resident Evil Dead Aim, and I do have a lot of fun playing it, but I think the game is perfect for the Resident Evil spin-off title, because the game is pretty much just made up of rip-off Resident Evil characters like Bruce and Fong Ling. Resident Evil Dead Aim is a pretty underrated Resident Evil game, and a lot of fans of the series do not like the game, which is probably due to the fact that it's more of like an action arcade shooter. Next up is a Resident Evil game that I was gonna put in the never played it category, but I decided not to just because I have played Outbreak, but just barely. As well as not playing it a lot, I also of course never beat it, so I don't really know a whole lot about Outbreak and can't really base it too well, but I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the absolutely terrible because the game was kind of just a spin-off with a lot of Resident Evil characters in it that we don't even know who they are. But now here we are with RE9 on the way, and the main protagonist is going to be Grace Ashcroft, which is Alyssa's daughter, so maybe I might have to check out Outbreak. Next up is OG RE4, which is definitely an instant classic and one of the best survival horror games of all time. The game definitely helped birth a new era of survival horror games and also inspired a lot of great horror games as well. The Mercenaries was great, and Separate Ways DLC is one of the best DLCs of all time, so this is definitely going to be a god tier game on my list. Now with Umbrella Chronicles, I'm not too sure where to put this one, so I went ahead and put it in the absolutely terrible category, even though I really do like the cutscenes and the story to it, but altogether, the gameplay can just be super boring. As you can tell, if you're a fan of the Wii, then this game might be for you, but most fans of the series will agree that this game definitely wasn't one of the best RE games that we've had. Now we've made it to my favorite part of this video, and that is Resident Evil 5, which is of course my favorite Resident Evil game. I was always so invested with the Resident Evil characters in the franchise that I always prayed for a co-op game to happen, and I was so thrilled to see that RE5 was coming out as a co-op game. All of my friends back in that time pretty much became fans of Resident Evil because of me showing them this game and us having so much fun while playing it. Some great memories will live in my head from that game, and also the Mercenaries and Lost in Nightmares are some of my favorite things to play as well. But moving on with this next entry on our tier list is going to be Operation Raccoon City. This one's also a pretty good candidate for the flawed but enjoyable rank on this tier list, so that's where I'm going to go ahead and leave it. I think the campaign could have been better, and the only thing I remember having fun doing was pretty much online mode. I almost wanted to put Resident Evil 6 in the great games category, but I'm gonna have to leave it in flawed but enjoyable as well. I'm not sure how many of you guys remember, but this one came out when Capcom was ready to call it quits on the mainline series, and so many fans were upset just over the fact that there was way too much action and not enough survival horror, especially for our final entry in the main series. So they definitely messed up big time there, but moving on with our next entry is going to be Revelations 2. For what is considered a spin-off game in the Resident Evil franchise, Revelations 2 is a really well done game that I think is certainly deserving of the God tier category. Also, I may be a bit biased because I'm huge fans of games like Mercenaries and stuff, and Raid Mode is just one of the funnest kinds of minigames that they've ever introduced in Resident Evil history. Next up is going to be RE7 Biohazard, which is just going to be staying in the Great Games category. Now, before the RE7 and Ethan Winters fans start going in the comments and absolutely roasting me, I want to go ahead and point out that I would have put this in the God tier category if the ship section wasn't just as drawn out and boring as it was. Cause this game definitely revived the RE franchise, and I have a lot of respect for that. The guy that made this tier list decided to put some DLC in here as well as kind of like some bonus content, I guess, or something. But I went ahead and put that in the never played it because I just never played it, and we're going to be moving on with RE2 Remake. Man, Resident Evil 2 Remake is one of my favorite Resident Evil games that they've done in definitely recent time. But in a way, this game kind of gave me the idea to start this channel. I platinumed this game so quickly that I started speedrunning the game, and therefore I wanted to post my runs on the leaderboard.com site, and to do so I needed to record them, and therefore I started this channel. So lots of love for RE2 Remake, but the next entry here is going to be the RE3 Remake, which was definitely cut short of content and a very short game. Luckily for me, this game came out while I was still in my speedrunning phase, so I had a lot of fun speedrunning this game as it was very easy to do so. but I'm definitely going to have to put it in the flawed but enjoyable category because clearly it was flawed due to the lack of content. So now moving on with our next entry is going to be Resident Evil Village, which I wanted to put in the Great Games category, but then I saw that I had it below RE7 and I decided to change that because I definitely like RE8 more than I did RE7. It felt very similar to RE7 in a way because of the first person aspect, but the gameplay was definitely a lot more unique a little bit and cooler just because it was set in like an Eastern Europe kind of snowy vibe. But when the third person camera angle update came out, that was when I really started to enjoy this game more and actually spend some more time on it. The only thing that's a shame is that you can't skip a lot of the cutscenes, so it makes this game kind of boring when you try to replay it. Therefore, I cannot place it in the God tier games. But this guy decided to add some DLC in here as some bonus content, I suppose. So we'll be moving on to this next entry here, which is the Shadows of Rose DLC. I actually think the Shadows of Rose DLC is one of the best DLCs that we've had in all of Resident Evil history, and I'm not even trying to bandwagon the game. Even though Rose has some kind of Mega Myces power, which is definitely not on point for Resident Evil games, it was kind of fun to just mess around and use those abilities, especially for a DLC that's not super long. Plus, you gotta agree, the cutscenes were super dope. Alright guys, we're starting to reach the end of this tier list, and we're going to be moving on with, of course, our most recent entry in the Resident Evil series, and that is the RE4 Remake. RE4 Remake definitely has some of the best graphics that we've had so far in the Resident Evil franchise, with also some really good atmosphere of the reimagined locations from the original RE4. To me, one thing that holds a lot of value is replayability, and I still go and find myself playing the OG RE4 kind of more often than I do the RE4 Remake. So as much as I'd love to admit that the RE4 Remake is a really well done game, I can't lie, I still like the OG RE4 a little bit more, I think. And now, this does it for our final entry, and that is the RE4 Remake Separate Ways DLC. I'm putting this in the Great Games category as well, but a little bit below Shadows of Rose DLC because I like both of those DLCs kind of equal, but I kind of find myself replaying the Shadows of Rose a little bit more than Separate Ways Remake. I've said this a few times before, and I think a lot of fans are blinded by the fact that the Separate Ways Remake kind of just added a lot of cut content that didn't make it into the main campaign of RE4. Another thing that's such a shame to me as well is that the Ada Wong voice actor didn't seem very enthused to be doing the part of Ada Wong, which definitely hurts me a little bit because Ada Wong is by far my favorite female character in the RE franchise. But that's going to go ahead and wrap up my official 2025 list of my favorite Resident Evil games. And before you guys dip out of here, I wanted to go ahead and review each of my entries from top to bottom so you guys can see whether or not you agree or disagree with my list. So, starting off my official 2025 Resident Evil tier list, at the number 1 spot is going to be Resident Evil 5. Followed up with that at number 2 is the original RE2. And number 3, RE4. Followed up with that is RE2 Remake, Code Veronica X, OG RE3, and Revelations 2. Now, below those ones in the Great Games category is the RE1 Remake, the original Code Veronica, Resident Evil Village, RE4 Remake, Shadows of Rose DLC, Separate Ways DLC, and RE7. Now in the Resident Evil games that I think are flawed but still enjoyable is the RE3 Remake, Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil 0, Dead Aim, Survivor, and Operation Raccoon City. And the ones that I don't really care for is Outbreak, Umbrella Chronicles, RE1 Director's Cut, and OG RE1. And then there's all the games that I've never played. But that's it guys, that is my official 2025 Resident Evil tier list. I always have a whole lot of fun making these videos, and as a matter of fact, I try to make one of these every single year, which is why I'm titling this the 2025 Resident Evil tier list. I believe I've been doing this every year since 2022 now, and I always have a lot of fun going back and watching my videos to see which entries have changed and which ones stay the same. Luckily for us, next year we're going to be getting Resident Evil 9, and I can't wait to see how fun and just how great that game is going to be, and where it might lie on my list of my favorite Resident Evil games. So drop a big like on this video if you guys are also excited for RE9, and comment down below which games in the RE franchise are your favorites. Also guys, I post Resident Evil content every single day, so make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a single Resident Evil video. I will see you all in the next video tomorrow. Peace.